Now first of all, let us consider a lipophilic hormone. So the example is estrogen. Now what we need to know is, in case of lipophilic hormones, the receptors which are interacting with these particular signals, that is nothing but the lipophilic hormones, these are present inside the cytoplasm. So these are present inside the cytoplasm of the cell. That means the lipophilic hormones can directly enter inside the cytoplasm of the cell. Now you may wonder how this can happen. The answer is simple. Because the lipophilic hormone is non-polar in nature. The lipophilic hormone is non-polar in nature, and we know that the cell membrane, the inside part of the cell membrane, which is made up of lipids, and lipids are also non-polar. So because the inner portion of the cell membrane, which is made up of lipids, it is non-polar in nature. That's why the hormones like estrogen or even progesterone, which are non-polar in nature, can easily pass through the cell membrane. So once the lipophilic hormones pass across the cell membrane, then they enter the cytoplasm. Now inside the cytoplasm, they interact with these receptors. So once the receptors bind with these signals, that is estrogen, they will enter the nuclear membrane. So receptors, when they bind with the estrogen, they will enter inside the nuclear membrane. Now this will happen through the pores which are present on the nuclear membrane. Now once these hormones enter inside the nuclear membrane and further they enter into the nucleus. Now once they enter inside the nucleus, we all know that inside the nucleus we have genetic material which is in the form of DNA. Now on the DNA there are special kind of sequences which are called as the hormone signal elements. So these are specially present on the DNA. So once the receptor which is associated with the estrogen, that is a lipophilic signal, so once the receptor is associated with the signal, this combination of receptor and signal will enter inside the nuclear membrane, and once it enters inside the nuclear membrane, it is going to enter in the nucleus, and in the nucleus they are going to attach to a particular site which is called as the hormone signal element, which is present on the DNA. Now once it binds to the hormone signal elements, once the receptor and the signal binds to the hormone signal elements, this will result in the process of transcription of specific mRNA, and ultimately it will lead to the formation of a specific protein which is required by the cell. Okay, so let me revise once again. How does the signaling occur in case of a lipophilic signal. When I say lipophilic signal, it means that these signals can easily pass through the cell membranes. How can they easily pass through the cell membranes? Because the inner part of cell membrane is basically non-polar, because the inner part of cell membrane is made up of lipids. So we know that a lipophilic signal can easily pass across the lipid portion of the cell membrane. So these signals which are lipophilic in nature, example is steroid hormones. So these steroid hormones can easily cross the cell membrane. Once it easily crosses the cell membrane, inside the cell, they interact with certain receptors which are present in the cytoplasm. So these steroid hormones, that is the signals, they can combine with the receptors which are present in the cytoplasm. Such receptors, let me tell you, are considered as the intracellular receptors. Let me write down over here. These receptors are basically intracellular receptors. Why? Because they are present inside the cytoplasm. Now the receptor and the hormone will bind together and it will result in the formation of a signal hormone complex. So such a complex of a receptor and a hormone is called as a receptor hormone complex. This complex will enter via the nuclear pores in from the nuclear membrane inside the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, we know that there is genetic material which is in the form of DNA. So these hormone receptor complexes will interact with some special kind of sequences which are present on the DNA. And these sequences are called as hormone signal elements. These hormone signal elements, once they get associated with the hormone receptor complexes, they will get activated, and once they get activated, then special kind of mRNAs are going to be formed from the DNA, and these mRNAs will form a specific protein which is required by the cell. So this is how a signal transduction occurs in case of a lipophilic signal, that is basically a non-polar signal. Now in case of a polar signal, the polar signal reacts with the receptor, and this particular receptor has three parts which are nothing but the extracellular domain part, the transmembrane part, and the intracellular domain region. So let me repeat, the receptors which basically receive the polar signals have three regions. One is the extracellular domain region. Now this region is basically present outside the cell membrane. Then comes the middle portion of the receptor, which is called as the transmembrane region. The transmembrane region is present across the cell membrane, or you can say inside the cell membrane. So let me ask you one question. If I ask you which part of this particular domain, that is out of the three, if you can tell me which part is going to be polar in nature and which part is going to be non-polar in nature. Now I am pretty sure that you must be able to answer this. Obviously, the extracellular domain region, which is present in the outside part of the membrane, is going to be polar in nature, because the outer part of the cell is again reacting with the outside environment of the cell, which is polar in nature, whereas the inner part of the receptor, the transmembrane region of the receptor, which is present inside the membrane, is going to be non-polar. So the transmembrane region of the receptor is non-polar because again the membrane is non-polar in nature, and that's why the transmembrane part of the receptor is also going to be non-polar. When I say non-polar, it means it is hydrophobic in nature. Now comes the inner portion of the receptor, which is called as the intracellular domain. Again, the intracellular domain is associated with the cytoplasm of the cell, and that's why the intracellular domain is also going to be polar in nature. Now, what happens is, as soon as the polar signal is accepted by the receptor, which is present on the membrane, this results in the activation of a signal transduction pathway. That means, in many cases, what happens once the extracellular domain binds to a particular signal, suppose the extracellular domain binds to this particular signal, what will happen is this will result in the activation of the intracellular domain. This intracellular domain is most often associated with another effector protein molecule. So let me repeat that once the extracellular domain of the receptor is activated with the help of a signal, this leads to the activation of the intracellular domain which is present inside the cell. Now this intracellular domain of the receptor consists of another effector protein which is often having a kinase activity. So this is very important. The intracellular domain of the receptor, once it gets activated, it has a effector protein which has got a kinase activity. So this protein gets activated, as a result of which it is going to activate certain another molecules which are present inside the cell, and these are called as the secondary messengers. These secondary messengers are ultimately responsible for showing a particular response in the cell. So, in case of polar signaling, we saw that the polar signals are going to associate with the receptors which are present on the cell membrane. These receptors have three different domains. One is extracellular domain, one is transmembrane domain, and the inner part is the intracellular domain. Once the signal is going to get associated with the extracellular domain, the intracellular domain is going to get activated. This intracellular domain has got another effector protein which is often having a kinase activity. So these effector proteins get activated, and then they activate certain another molecules inside the cell which are called as secondary messengers, and these secondary messengers are going to show a response in the cell. Now let me give you an example. This kinase activity is most often consisting of amino acid tyrosine. At the same time, once the tyrosine kinase is getting activated, this gets activated with the help of certain reactions which are nothing but phosphorylation reactions. So they get activated with the help of phosphate. Once they get activated, they result in the formation of certain secondary messengers. Example over here is cyclic AMP. And the cyclic AMP is mainly responsible for showing a response inside the cell. So now in this video we have understood that how does a cell signaling occur, whether the signal is of polar nature or whether it is of non-polar nature. In both the cases, ultimately the cell is going to show a response. So now I hope you have understood the concept of cell signaling. If you have understood this particular concept, please like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to One Page Biology. See you all in the next video with some another biology related concept. If you want me to make videos on any other concept related to biology, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much. See you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.